Okay, good morning kids. It's Mr. Gale again, and today we're going to talk about some of the tools in my shop. First off, we're going to talk about saws. Now, last time I talked to you, we had a big piece of wood like this. What I did was I cut this in half, and the other half I made it into lumber that I can use for some small projects. So the saw that we use to make these pieces of wood from the big piece is a bandsaw. The bandsaw is just over here, and I'm going to show you how this happens. So what I did was I took the big piece and I put it through this bandsaw. Now the bandsaw has a blade here which has a bunch of teeth on it, and this blade moves. Let me show you how it works. Inside here, this blade, it goes in a big loop down there and around into the bottom, and there's a motor attached to this wheel, and that drives the blade around. So if you can see, when I move this, the blade moves. So what we did, we made all of these pieces of wood by putting a big piece through the blade and cutting it. And we used a fence to guide the wood. I've taken that off now. But the other thing the bandsaw is good for is cutting curves. If I had something like I wanted to make a curve on here, I could put it through the blade and turn the piece by hand as it went through. So bandsaw is a very useful machine. The other saw that I was going to show you, next one, is a table saw. Now a table saw is a big piece of machinery. It's got a very powerful motor, and it drives this blade here. Now the blade can go up and down depending on how thick the wood is that you're cutting, and it can also tilt. So there's a lot of different things you can use that for. Now one of the main things we use the table saw for is called ripping. And ripping means that you're cutting in line with the grain. Okay, so if I wanted to cut this board so that it was narrower, I'd use this fence, I'd bring it over where I needed it, and then I'd push the piece of wood through the saw, and that would make a nice straight cut. Okay? The other thing I might want to do with the table saw, move this out of the way, and use this thing, which is called a miter gauge, and that's used for making cross cuts. Let's cross the grain. So I put my board here, and if I wanted to cut the end off this, I just push the board past the blade, and it would make a cut right there. Okay? So table saw and the bandsaw are tools that are called power tools because they have electric motors, and you got to be very careful to have eye protection. You use safety glasses so you don't get any particles catching your eyes. I also have these things attached to a dust collector, which is over there, and it sucks up the sawdust and chips that made by the blades, and that keeps them from getting into your lungs. And the other thing I do is I use these things, which are for hearing protection, so that the noise doesn't disturb my ears. Okay, so another tool that we have is a little different from the table saw. It's called a chop saw, and it's over here. And this is a little bit different because on this saw, you don't move the wood. You put the wood where you want to cut it, and then you move the saw down through the wood. So in one case, with the table saw, we move the wood through the blade, and the same thing with the bandsaw. This one, we move the blade through the wood. So it's just the opposite. So these are all power tools, and like I said, they're all noisy, and they're all pretty expensive tools as well. So I'll show you some hand tools now that are used for cutting wood. These are much less expensive tools, and they're much more common, and they're kind of old-fashioned in a way, but we still use them a lot. And a lot of people like using hand tools because they're readily available, and they're not too expensive, and they don't make so much noise, and they don't make so much sawdust. So that's a little bit nicer way of working with wood. Now this is a crosscut saw used for mostly in construction, and it's got a wide blade, and that keeps the line straight when you're making straight lines, if you're cutting a sheet of plywood or cutting the end off of a big board. So that's crosscut saw. This is called a back saw, and this is used for smaller pieces and when you're making finer cuts. It's got finer teeth, smaller teeth. You can see the teeth on there, and these are really very sharp. And then this is another saw which is used for cutting wood, and it's got very fine teeth, and they're very sharp. This is a Japanese type saw, and I'm just going to demonstrate how this works. Okay, supposing we had, what happened to our board? Oh yeah, there it is. So we've got a little board here, and we want to cut this and make it exactly 12 inches long. So what we do is we measure across here, and then we make a little pencil mark right where it says 12 inches. Okay, and then we take a little square, which is used for making straight lines because we want it to be straight across. We make a line there. I broke my lead. That's okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to clamp it in this vise so it stays still while I'm doing this. Then I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. And this saw is kind of peculiar. It's different than most American or European saws because this one cuts when you pull it. These saws cut when you push. So it's a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my thumb to get started here. Let me try to keep it straight. It doesn't take very long to cut through this board. There we go. Take it out of the vise. Let's just check and make sure I did it right. And measure across there. There we go. It's right at 12 inches. Okay, so that's a little bit about saws. So now you know a little bit about them. There's a lot more other kinds of saws that people have in their shops, but these are the ones that I probably use the most. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk again soon.